For those of you who I've met, I feel like I've met most of you have seen me in some other context, but real quick, for those of you who are new to my world, welcome. I'm glad you're in it. My background is restaurant management, then Peace Corps, and then 10 years of corporate and contract training. And for the last 8 years, I've been out on my own, but with all of these different careers, and I've lived in about 20 different places, there's been this through line of human connection. And I've always been curious about what makes people tick. And now I'm really focused on what makes people click. And so my work now is really about leaders, how they show up authentically, with credibility, establishing authority, and really about how do they create this authentic presence. And so that's part of what we are going to be working on today. How do you all embrace your presence, your authenticity to be able to land your point? So we're going to talk a little bit about what works and what doesn't. And then, as promised, we're going to get into the do, think, feel framework. And so today, you've already heard me say it. These are the categories that we're going to be focusing in on. If the camera, oh, there we go. Meeting, presenting, keynotes, and conversations. So it actually sounds like we have one, like every single one of these is going to be highlighted by one of you today. And so as we start to think about this, I want you to think about when you're on the other side of one of these events. So let's start with the meeting. Have you ever gone into a meeting and I'm going to say it's not even the normal Wednesday morning staff meeting that's been on the calendar for 20 years and no one really knows why, but let's say this is an actual purposeful meeting and you go in and there's a loose agenda. But then soon you start to hear that there's two different work groups and they have completely different ideas about what needs to happen for the project. So they start going back and forth and getting in the weeds and going back and forth. And you're like, this doesn't really have anything to do with me. And then you're noticing some weird dynamics with some of the other teams. And half the people are on their phones. Half the people are there's another group that's snipping at each other. And you're sitting here and you're like, what is happening? What is going on? And I don't know if that sounds familiar to any of you, but yeah, being on the other side of a meeting like that. Then let's think about being on the other side of a presentation. Now, one that comes to mind, it's coming up on 2 years now. November 17th, I think, is National Women's Entrepreneurship Day. I went to a conference here in Jacksonville, and first thing that was peculiar was that one of the speakers was a Catholic priest. And I was like, read the room, unsure what a Catholic priest has to do with women's entrepreneurship. But the next thing was there was a woman talking about her business. And I have to say that I can't remember anything that she said because she started off promising, because she said, I have some acronyms. And I'm like, oh, acronyms? I love an acronym as much as the next person. Except I don't remember what they were, but I do remember counting up the letters. There was 18 letters. That's 18 letters in a 30-minute talk. That's less than 2 minutes per point. And I think it's this mentality of we have to give them all the information, right? They're coming to the conference. We got to make it worth their time. But really, as mentioned, I left and I was like, there's too much. I'm overwhelmed. I'm overloaded. And now let's talk about being on the other end of a conversation. And this sounds like Bridget, maybe a little bit. But when you go in and you're thinking, all right, I'm going to talk to Sue about this. And then you walk away from the conversation and you're thinking, what just happened? I was talking to Sue about this, but now I have to go have 3 conversations with other people that she threw under the bus. I now have agreed to an extra week of paid vacation for Sue. She got me to pay for the $5,000 presentation training that she's wanted to do for years. And I'm driving her kids to soccer tomorrow. How did any of that happen? Right? And how often do we go into these conversations planning on one thing to happen, but then they get turned around and they get twisted and they go sideways? And so when we think about all of those different types of conversations, I want you to think about, and again, thinking about the conversations that you're planning, what are we doing to people's time? What are we doing with their energy? How are we touching their emotions? And what action do we want them to take? And so I don't know about you, and I could ask you, but I'll just give you the answers. I think with those first ones that I just described, like walking out of those meetings, we're thinking, hey, this was a huge waste of my time. You've zapped all of my energy by fire hosing me with tons of information. Either there's no emotion or like angry emotion, frustration of having to sit there and listen to all of this. And then finally, it's the confusion. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know what the next actions should be. So I have thought of 3 kind of buckets, as I'm calling them, of things that we do that that get in the way of or why we do this. Like what's happening to make these conversations and these meetings go so off track. So I'm going to share my 3 with you, and then I'm going to pause, and if anything else is coming up for you for reasons why you think they go off track, we can have a quick conversation about it. So first, we have, there's lots to say. Next, there's dynamics at play. And then third, there's emotions that make us stray. And if you've known me for more than 7 seconds, you know that I love a rhyme. So conveniently, I got these 3 buckets to rhyme. So the first one, lots to say. Now, again, if you know me, I'm a pretty much like benefit of the doubt, positive intent person. So let's go with the benefit of the doubt and positive intent. That woman at the conference knew a lot, just like I'm sure you all know a lot. So when we are having a meeting or when we're delivering a presentation, we have this tendency to be like, well, I'm here. I want it to be a good use of their time. So let me share everything that I know. Like, let me let them know what I know so we can establish our credibility. I also think about conference organizers. So often they're like, we wanted to make a good use of our time, like the participants' time. What are you going to teach them? And we get so intent on having all of this to say. And I would argue that less is more, because if you tell me everything you know, I'm not going to remember anything that you know. The second one, we have dynamics at play. So think about that meeting that you go to and think about who's in that meeting. Maybe it's your senior leaders, like Allison was talking about. Maybe you're going and you're talking to your team. Maybe you have a meeting with a client. There's going to be different dynamics happening with all of them. So your tone and your message might have to change a little bit. There's also just corporate or internal company dynamics. Maybe there's competing commitments for resources that you have. These types of things all factor in when we go in to have a conversation or have a meeting. We need to take into consideration the dynamics that are happening and figure out, how do we adjust? How do we work with all of those things that are going on? And then also, again, there's always the office politics. How do we sort through all that? And then the final piece is the emotions that make us stray. So I want to give, again, a shout out to Allison for her generous example that started us off. And we are emotional beings, right? I always joke, as much as my husband would like to convince me that he has no emotions, I'm like, you do, Mike. They're just like very suppressed down in you, but we are emotional beings. So our emotions, if they are at the forefront, if they're heightened, can get us off track. They can make us maybe say things we don't want to, not be as clear as we want to. But the other beautiful thing about us having emotions and being people that respond and react, there's an opportunity there for you all to create emotion. Because when we have those strong emotions and those moments, that's what we remember. And that's what really creates an impact. So I'm going to pause there, and I'm just curious, is anything else come up for you about maybe why we don't land our point? What gets in the way of us landing our point? So if we go back to, and if you're thinking about that, we had our time, our energy, our emotion, and our action. You as leaders trying to create impact, what we want to do is, instead of the waste, the zap, the anger, and the confusion, what we want is people to say, they valued my time, or my time was valued. We want, with the energy, we want them to feel that they're like, we want to fuel their energy, make them feel fired up. When it comes to emotion, we want them to feel something. Hey, even if it's bad news and like we have to share something, if they're feeling, then we're connecting. And then finally, we want to galvanize them into action. And so your people that you're speaking with, your bosses, everyone, and what they're looking for, they're saying, hey, I want you to inspire me. I want you to guide me. I want you to activate me. I want you to galvanize me. And this is exactly what we're going to do. When you land your point, you create this impact. And so now, the moment you've been waiting for, when we're going to talk about how do you land this point? And what we are going to do is we are going to set our intentions. And when we talk about setting our intention, it's defined as what you intend to do or have come about. So there's no guaranteed outcomes, but our intention is like, hey, this is what I want to have happen. So what do I need to do to make that happen? Enter our do, think, know, feel framework. I think of this framework as the guardrails, the guidelines, and the grounding for any meeting, presentation, keynote, or conversation. And I love, whenever I'll start doing this soon, because I'm like, it's those guardrails and the guide for, when you go to talk to someone about being late and they're like, well, Michelle's late, cool, but we're talking about you, right? So this is like my dance for the intention is we're always bringing it back. We're bringing it back and we're keeping it focused. And you might be wondering, well, what do you mean by grounding? Again, Allison, thank you for your example, because again, I know it's very true for me. When we come with these emotions, and Catherine's example too, there's probably some, I'm not trying to like speak for your emotions, Catherine, and correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe there's some like nervousness or some like anticipation, a little bit of anxiety, right? How do we ground those down? And you're going to find that when we define this intention, that will help with that. One of my, this was one of the clients I was working with, she was having a really, really, really tough time with someone on her team. So she was going to go have a conversation with this woman. And I'm like, okay, so let's, work through our intention. I'm like, what do you want her to do? And she was like, quit. And I'm like, what do you want her to think about? She's like, what a horrible human being is and how toxic she is to the whole organization. And I'm like, how do you want her to feel? And she's like shit. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, this is not going to be a good conversation. Like, this is not, like, that is not going to go anywhere fast. And she wasn't actually joking, because I think that's how she actually felt. But we also have to get it out. Like, we have to get it out. And we can see that, that's not going to be a good conversation. And so what did she really want her to do was to think about the impact that she was having on our team. So now I'm going to highlight the do, think, feel. The beauty of this framework is that it's pretty straight. It's like deceivingly straightforward, that it doesn't need a whole lot of explanation. But when you nail it, you're going to head in the right direction. So we think about, what do we want to do? You want to tie this into an action or behavior. What do you want them to think about? When you're thinking about that, you want them to think about the impact. It's always helpful to tie the thinking into an impact. No. You don't always need to have a no, but if you do, is there knowledge that they don't have? Is there something situational that they need to be aware of? And then finally, feel. When they walk away from this conversation with you, when they walk away from hearing you speak, when they walk away from your presentation, how do you want them to feel? And when we can dial into that feeling, it is beautiful, for lack of a better word, the questions that we come up with, the approach that we take. Because imagine if she had approached that woman being like, I want her to feel like crap, right? She's going to go in and be like all angry and agitated. But if she's like, hey, I want her to feel like empowered, it's going to be a totally different take. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you my intention for today, and we'll see. You guys can rank me on a scale of 1 to 7. 1 if I'm like a star in the galaxy, or 7 if Simone Biles nailed it. All right, let's see. This is it. What did I want you to do? Apply the framework. What did I want you to think about? Oh my God. There, I'm just going to read it and then I'll show it to you. The responsibility as leaders to get this right, to create the impact they want to make. What do I want you to know? What goes wrong? And then the framework, and also how to work with me. And then I want you to feel confident, empowered, and that this was a great use of your time. Rankings? I'm just kidding. Joking aside, really, thank you. I'm like, as I just need the validation, but this is what I did. And as I mentioned, when I was like, should I talk about this? Should I talk about this? Should I talk about this? Nope, 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 nope. This is what it is. And you could also see, right, we are right at time now. I would have been here for 17 more hours. So this is another way to make sure that what you're saying, you can get done in the time that you're doing it. So I want to say thank you. And I also want to say, as leaders, this is one of those things that taking a few minutes can have such a ripple effect on your impact, on your relationships, on the fact that, right, when people are saying, hey, inspire me, guide me, activate me, galvanize me, when you do think, feel, this is going to set you up to do just that.